Another loser, Donald. Another segment where Donald Trump has no friggin' idea what the hell he's talking about. So first, let's roll the tape of Donald Trump telling us about an email that they found out through John Podesta. Now, the email is true. Now, let me show you what Donald Trump says about it, and then I'll tell you the reality and how this schmuck has no idea what he's talking about. Let's watch.
The system is corrupt, folks, and I've been saying it, it's rigged. I've been saying it for a long time. The system is rigged. Wikileaks also shows how John Podesta rigged the polls by oversampling Democrats, a voter suppression technique. And that's happening to me all the time. When the polls are even, when they leave them alone and do them properly, I'm leading. But you see these polls where they're polling Democrats. How's Trump doing? Oh, he's down. They're polling Democrats. The system is corrupt, and it's rigged, and it's broken, and we're going to change it.
That's wrong in almost every way you can imagine. First of all, John Podesta is rigging the system, voter suppression, and things like that are happening to me. The email's from 2008. Has nothing to do with this election. Did John Podesta know that you were going to run 8 years later and he'd have to do voter suppression against it? Come on. Okay, point number one. Point number two, no, it's not a voter suppression technique, and they don't just poll Democrats. So let me explain what they do and what oversampling is and why they do it, because apparently this schmuck needs an education. The email is a January 2008 exchange, PolitiFact explains, so explaining whether what his statement is true or not, between Democratic strategists and employees of the Atlas Project, a political polling and data firm. Atlas sent over 98 pages of polling and media recommendations that include several recommendations to oversample minorities, independent voters, and Democrats in certain states. The technical term for this is stratified disproportionate sampling, but most pollsters use oversample as a shorthand. It's done not to skew the polls, but to gauge the attitudes of specific demographic groups who would not be a statistically large enough group to analyze if sampled randomly. So here's what that means. It's not an external poll. They're not just polling black Democratic voters and going, oh, you see that? Obama's going to win or Hillary Clinton's going to win. No, it's an internal poll. And the reason you do this technique is so that you can get a sense of how are African Americans going to vote? How are Latinos going to vote? How are white women going to vote? How are white Republican men with no college education going to vote? That it's a polling method that you use to try to figure out how you could run your campaign better. You would know that if you were even a tiny bit competent and knew how to run your campaign. But you don't know how to do any of that. You don't know what any of this is. So he goes, I figured it out. John Podesta's rigging the polls. He's oversampling. It's voter suppression. God, you're so monumentally stupid. And no, there's no polls right now that are showing him down because all they did was ask Democrats. Look, he actually is doing better in some of the polling than the mainstream media talks about. He could actually talk about that. Today there's a poll out where he's winning in Florida. And the mainstream media is like, oh, she's going to win in a landslide. They're in their bubble. So that would be a fair point. But to go and take this email and skew it out of proportion, and not even out of proportion, just completely false, well, it shows what a buffoon you are. And that's not how voter suppression works anyway. And he keeps saying that the polling is rigged, which then he then goes on to say the election is rigged. But we haven't had the election yet, you schmuck. No, these are all excuses because he thinks he's going to lose. It's not that he's worried that the media thinks he's going to lose. He thinks he's going to lose. Because, again, it goes to this deep-seated fear and insecurity that he's a loser and could never impress his dad. So he's like, it's rigged against me. It's rigged. I know it. That's why I'm going to lose. It's rigged. It's the voter suppression. I'm telling you. Podesta did it. Podesta did it back in 2008 to me. Loser.